Hello, and welcome to Before We Get There. I'm your host, Nicholas Brayman. And before we get there, we talk to people about how they got to where they are, what keeps them pushing forward, and where they eventually want to get to. Today, I want to talk to you about focusing on the journey, not the destination. This phrase is something that I learned later in life that I think will be beneficial for many people to think about more deeply and consider how it can help them in their lives. To me, the most important point behind this phrase, focus on the journey, not the destination, is because difficult things take time, and relying solely on goals or focusing on the goal and not what it takes to get there will lead people to be less successful than they could be if they lean into the journey and learn to enjoy the journey along the way. Whenever you're starting a new project, whether it's in your personal life or you're working on thinking about your career path or a new hobby, a new skill that you're learning, most of the time people get super excited at the beginning. And the motivation and the energy of starting this project or learning this skill will take them to a certain level. But if they are not cognizant that eventually this motivation, this eagerness will go away, they're going to be in for a rude awakening. And what usually happens is they end up giving up, or they reach their first goal, whether that's to run a half marathon, whether that's to get a blue belt in Jiujitsu, or whether that's getting a certain job title or salary level. And then they'll be a little bit lost. And hopefully they're able to recalibrate to set the next goal. But often it isn't so easy to do that. So today we'll be talking about this topic, and we'll be talking about it from a few different angles, especially where I have experience. Probably where it can be seen most clearly is in Jiu-Jitsu, so we'll go through that. And the other place is in your career or your workplace. And again, setting a goal to get a promotion or even to get a new job, the next job. Those are all great. But when you look back after you've been working for even 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, you're going to realize that all those goals you set along the way, they weren't what actually has gotten your experience to where it is, made you into the person, the employee, the marketer, the writer, the software engineer that you are at that time. It's all of the little steps in that journey, the experience on different projects that have made you as good as you are. So I think by starting earlier and from the beginning, looking at the journey step by step as the important part, instead of putting the goals in front of you as the important part, we all can be a lot more successful, and you can enjoy that journey a lot more than if you're always looking far out ahead and waiting to get to that next step. It starts when we're kids, right? I think most of us, when we were kids, there was always something we wanted to do that we were too young or too small to do, and we all couldn't wait until you're independent from your parents, until you have your own spending money, until you're living on your own. And then once we get to that point and you start adulting, you realize, oh, I have to do this 24/7. It's not as much fun as I thought it would be, and I wish that I had enjoyed being a kid and not having responsibilities and appreciated that more when that was the case. But you can never go back to that. Now you're an adult and you're on your own. So I think that's a good experience that kind of brings this into focus that most people have been to. I think most of us don't have the foresight when we're young to realize, wow, this is great. I get to go to school and be done at 3 or 4 o'clock. My parents pay for stuff. I don't have to worry about washing the clothes or doing the dish. Maybe you have chores, but it's not all your responsibility. End of the day, if something happens, you still have somebody, hope, for most of us, we still have our parents to fall back on for anything. And then once you become an adult or even further down the road, maybe lose your parents, which is probably why losing your parents is part of the reason it's so hard for people, is because up until then, you've always had somebody in your life that hopefully, if it was a good situation, you could rely on to be there for you. And all of a sudden, this person is gone. So I want to start with a little story of it happened just this week that while I was thinking about this idea and forming it into how I want to talk through this podcast, it was a perfect example. A few days ago, I took my daughter on a walk, and I wanted to take her to the playground that's maybe a 10 or 15-minute walk away, 10-minute walk away if I was walking by myself. And I thought, okay, we have some time after work. It's a nice sunny day. I hadn't been out with her that day yet. She'd been at the house, so let's go out and walk to this playground. And as we walk out the door, go out of our compound, out the gate, and the first thing we have to do is we have to cross the street by walking up the stairs to an overhead bridge, and then to the other side and walk down the stairs to cross this big street in front of our house. And so she wanted me to carry her when we first came out. And then as soon as she saw the stairs, she loves walking upstairs. So she was super excited. And she said, I'm gonna walk up the stairs by myself. So she walked up the stairs and she's super happy with herself. And she gets it up to the top of the stairs and she's walking across this overhead bridge, looking down at all the cars, playing with the fence alongside of her, and just super enjoying herself. And she gets to the other side. She's proud of herself for walking down the stairs on the other side. And we continue walking down the road, and there's a bunch of leaves on the ground. And so she's stopping to pick up the leaves and see which leaf is best, and walk a few more steps. And there's some roots of a tree sticking out of the ground. So she climbs up on the roots and jumps down into the grass, and then walks a few more steps and finds something else that's interesting that she's played with. And it took us 30 or 40 minutes to get to the park. And as I was watching and realizing how much fun she was having along the journey, just to get to the park, it was just as much fun as she had once she got to the park and she was playing on the swings and the slides and all that sort of thing. Intellectually, it's easy to figure out why. Everything's new to her. She's a little kid. She enjoys walking upstairs, which most adults don't take any pleasure in walking upstairs. Maybe you don't mind it, but it's not something you look forward to. But for her, she's only climbed stairs less than 100 times in her life, and it's still new for her. She's still proud of being able to climb up the stairs by herself. And so her taking immense joy in that journey along the walk to the park. And clearly, even if we hadn't gotten to the park, even if we'd walked 20 minutes out or 30 minutes out and turned around and walked back home, she would have thought that was a great time. She would have had just as much fun if we never even made it to the playground. And I think there's definitely a lesson we could all take in that into our own lives. And to me, it was a perfect representation of this concept of focusing on the journey, enjoying the journey, not just the destination. Honestly, I was probably 35 years old before I had really thought about this and gone through an experience that made me really realize it. I don't think I was ever a person who was not enjoying the journey of the different things I did, but it never really hit home until I started training Jiujitsu. And so for those of you who don't know, Jiujitsu is like wrestling. It's a martial art. It's a combat sport, specifically a grappling art. So you are wrestling with other people. You can do submissions on them and get them to tap out. Whereas if they didn't tap out, they would either be choked, not be able to breathe, or you would break one of their limbs. Jiu-Jitsu is a very tough sport. It's something that a lot of people fall in love with when they first start, because most adults do not have this kind of physical activity in their lives. It's something we do as kids. It's something animals do to wrestle with each other. But most adults eventually lose that. You don't have that kind of competition, that kind of activity where you're using your body to control other people. In the US, there's a lot of wrestlers, but that usually stops after high school or college. Other martial arts are not nearly as close contact if they're not grappling sports, like judo, which is like the father or the grandfather of jiu-jitsu. So it's something that, and it's become super popular over the last 10 years, especially from people like Joe Rogan, Jocko Willink, that have promoted it and sung its praises as a form of self-discipline, as a way to incorporate it into a healthy lifestyle, as a way to learn about yourself, to learn about your limits and all of that sort of thing. I've been training jiu-jitsu now for coming up on 7 years. So that's quite a long time. I've gone, for any time except when I was injured or traveling, at least 3 times a week, for a large portion of that, more like 5 times a week, for training sessions. And so I've seen a lot of people come and go. I'm not particularly good at jiu-jitsu, but I love doing it. And there's a meme basically in jiu-jitsu. So jiu-jitsu is a fairly traditional martial art. There's a belt system. And jiu-jitsu practitioners pride themselves on the fact that the belt system is harder than other martial arts. So whereas in taekwondo or even judo, karate, you might become a black belt in anywhere from 2, 4, 5 years, depending on the instructor and the martial art. Jiu-jitsu, for normal people, it's usually a minimum of 10 years before you get your black belt. So usually you get your blue belt after the first 1 to 2 years, and then you probably spend 2 to 3 years at blue belt, and you move to purple belt, another 2 to 3 years, with a brown belt, etc. Brown belt 2 years, and finally you get to black belt after 10 years for the average person. And what you quickly find when you start training jiu-jitsu is that people disappear. A lot of people disappear after only the first couple of months. Again, they come in, they get really excited about it, and then they stop coming. That's the vast majority of people, is they never even really get into the sport. They may come in for a trial, they may do it for a month or 2 months, maybe even 6 months or a year. But eventually they lose interest. Maybe they get injured, unfortunately. They move on to another hobby. And I would say they never even become a full jiu-jitsu practitioner. They just barely touch the surface. Because it is a difficult sport, art, whatever you want to call it. Most people would say, I think after the first year, you still barely know what you're doing. After the first 2 years, I myself, after 6 years, still barely feel like I know what I'm doing. Because it's very complex. And it's not natural to most people. So that's the first group of people you see leave. But then you see a lot of other people that disappear. Where the meme is that blue belts disappear. So that's the first colored belt you get, the first acknowledgement of being a practitioner of sport. That usually happens at around the 2-year mark. And the meme is that people disappear after they get the blue belt. Because you do find for that group of people that does stick around for more than a couple months, a lot of them have a big goal in their mind that they want to get their blue belt. They say blue belts, besides white belts, there's usually the most blue belts in a gym, right? Because at every belt level you get, you have attrition. Black belts are the fewest, and then brown belts and purple belts. And so usually after white belts are blue belts. And the skill level gap between blue belts and white belts is usually big enough that to a person who's brand new to the sport, the blue belt can have their way with it. They can win all the time, depending on the size difference and if they come from other combat sports. But it's a common enough phenomenon that everybody in jiu-jitsu makes jokes about the blue belts leaving. And that's because the common wisdom is because they have set that goal of getting to blue belt. And once they get that goal, they lose the motivation. They lose the discipline to keep training. There's 3 more belts to go after you get blue belt. So you're really only, at most, a quarter of the way through the journey, become a black belt. And why is it that you lose so many people at that 2-year mark? It's because since they started training jiu-jitsu, they had a goal of getting their blue belt, and that was where their motivation to keep training came from. And once they get their blue belt, they lose the motivation and they quit training. And The reason I think this lesson is so pronounced in jiu-jitsu is because it's very obvious. Your blue belt is awarded by your coach. In Brazil, it's called professor. Professor just means teacher in Portuguese. In Japanese, it's sensei or whatever. But your coach, it's arbitrary, right? It's not like a physical or an exact set of criteria that mean you get your blue belt. It's different for each coach and each student. So most coaches are pretty consistent across their group of students what it takes. Some schools, academies, gyms, whatever, have formalized tests. The majority don't. When your coach thinks you're ready to become a blue belt, that you're a blue belt level, they give you a blue belt. Are you any better than the day before when you were a white belt? No, you're exactly the same. It's just one small step on this journey. Just that you have this colored belt around your waist now that to maybe in your own head, but definitely to external people, gives you some sort of validation or credibility or whatever. But you're exactly the same as you were when you were a white belt one day earlier. And so that it proves that this goal is not, it's important, but it's not meaningful. You don't get any extra skill or strength or speed or ability just because you have a blue belt around your waist. You're exactly the same as you were the day before, except your coach is giving you the blue belt. I think a lot of people come to the realization after they get the blue belt that, oh, it's just another day. I still have to come and train and learn and spar and get better. And it's not just one more day of this. There's another maybe 8 years of this before I get to black belt. And then, of course, when you talk to black belts, they'll tell you, oh, yeah, once I get to black belt, it's like starting all over again. To me, this was even before I got to blue belt, because I was a white belt for a very long time, I think 4 years. And I was not one of the people that had this huge goal to get a blue belt. I wanted to be in the cool kids club or whatever. For me, it's just training. I wanted to get better. But that showed me, first of all, from seeing so many other people that it happened to. And then second of all, from learning where my motivation and desire to keep training came from. It was really a perfect demonstration of enjoying the journey and not the destination, because I 100% feel if I end up getting a black belt someday, which may or may not happen, I know already at this point that it's not going to be that belt around my waist. It's going to be the day after day of training and learning that gets me to that point. And so when you think about a goal that you're trying to reach or an activity that you're trying to become better at, you have to realize that it's every step along the journey combined that gets you to that goal. And if you can learn to love each step, enjoy each step, feel good about taking each step, it's going to make everything a lot easier, a lot smoother for you. And you're not going to lose that momentum. I think another example would be hiking. In hiking, there's what's called alpining, whatever you want to call it. There's something called false peaks. It looks like you're getting to the top of the mountain, but it's not actually the top. Once you get there, there's another top beyond that. And it's a similar, again, I don't think most people turn around at the mountain at that point, but mentally it's disheartening. When you're looking up to that peak and you're, I'm almost there. And then you get there, oh, there's another whole peak, or 3 or 4 or 5 more peaks that I have to climb to get there. And it's mentally disheartening, because if you're focused on getting to the next peak or what you think is the actual peak. And that's definitely something that people have to deal with mentally. It would have been easier to keep climbing if you weren't worried at all mentally, or weren't thinking, oh, I'm almost there. But if you were just focusing on every step, one step at a time, putting one foot in front of the other, enjoying the view around you, enjoying what's going on at that moment in your journey, rather than looking ahead to that false peak. And then once you get to the false peak, you realize you have a whole lot more to go. Another area that this can affect a lot of people, and a lot of people can put it into practice, even when they are not doing something like jiujitsu or hiking or anything, is thinking about your career. Most people, if they have a career, they should be thinking about what they want to do next, about where they want to get to, what kind of company they want to work for, what kind of job title they want to have, what they want to be doing. And again, this can be an area that people put a cart before the horse. You think, okay, I want to be a director someday. I want to be making $100,000, $200,000, whatever it is a year. And they may be thinking about what it takes to get there, but they may not be enjoying what it takes to get there and realizing that everything you do, even if it's in a different industry, I worked in a lot of industries before I got into marketing. Every step of your journey makes up your experience and results in who you are at any point in time. And whether it's a good job, a bad job, whether it's related or not, without that experience, you wouldn't be exactly who you are. And so even if you're not enjoying something at any given moment, you have to try to put it in perspective that this is just one step on your journey. And you may have a lot or a few more steps left in this stage. But once this stage is over, you move on to the next stage, and there'll be a lot more steps in that stage. We talk a lot about skills, hard skills, soft skills, leadership skills, time management, all these different things. And you can get better at all of those, but it's everything put together in one package that makes you who you are as a professional. So when you're thinking about your career, and it's a very common interview question, right? Where do you want to be in 5 years? And if you're anything like me, for most of my career, I just made up an answer, or I hadn't thought that deeply about it. I don't want to be making more money than I am now. In the 5 years, I should be making more money. I probably want to have more responsibility. I probably want to be doing better things, cooler things. Like, it's not always a very clear idea for most people in your career what exactly that is you want to do. So, you might have an idea, a vague idea in your head, unless it's something like, I think there's some fields maybe that's clear. You should have advancement every 2 years, or you want to be, you're a resident doctor intern and you want to be a full doctor or something like that. But for a lot of us, at any point in our career, what's in 5 years? What's the goal? It's not always clear. And that's fine. I think that I talked to a couple of my guests about this. Our career goals and our career paths evolve as we go. And they should evolve. We should be checking in and realizing, even your first, I remember when I was starting out my career and everybody has these skill finders and people talk about finding your passion, finding what you're meant to do, all this sort of thing. But it's pretty hard when you're young, just out of school. You don't know what you're good at yet. Most people don't know what they're good at yet because you don't have enough experience. You haven't done enough things to figure out. You don't have enough data points to know what you're good at. And so if you look back after you've been working for 5 years and then after 10 years, you should have a much better idea about what you are good at, what you're passionate about. And that's when you have the experience and know how to be able to pivot or shift paths or narrow in, niche down on your career, rather than trying to decide when you're just out of college. But in any case, think about every step along your career as part of your journey and not as, don't only just look forward to that next goal. And what you'll realize, again, another one of my favorite phrases is the days are long, but the years are short. And that comes from parenting and thinking about when you're raising kids, especially when they're super young, it can be really tough. The days seem super long, but then you look back at how quickly they grow and realize the years are short. But that's true in a lot of places in life. I think working is one of them. Going to the office, working 8 hours a day, 10 hours a day It definitely feels long. But then when you look back at your experience and what you've accomplished, hopefully, you realize, wow, I've really done a lot. And it's not something that you can really think about when you first start. It doesn't seem like it's going to be that big a deal. So I would like everybody to think about where in your life that you can use this phrase, this thought process of enjoying the journey, not just looking towards the goal. Lean in to what you're doing at any given time. Enjoy that moment. Enjoy that level of capabilities or expertise that you have. Don't always be looking forward to the next step. If you're a creator or you're starting a business, you can't wait to be bigger. You can't wait to be making more money. You can't wait to be doing the next thing. But really stay focused on the now. Learn to enjoy the now and not just be looking forward to the next thing. It's great to have goals. You should have goals. But you shouldn't be so focused on your goals that you're ignoring what's around you at this point in time. I guess it basically boils down to just being more mindful and getting more out of every step in your journey. So that's what I wanted to share with you today. I hope you all got some value out of this, thinking about your own journey and the stage you're at, where you want to get to, and how you can enjoy the stage you're at right now on your journey just a bit more. That's all for today. I'll see you next time on Before We Get There.
Thank you for listening to Before We Get There with your host, Nicholas Brayman. Please like and subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast platforms like Spotify and Apple Podcasts. You can also find us on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook at Before We Get There Podcast. New episodes are released every Thursday morning. See you next time.